9:40 p.m., East El Paso, Texas. A family-owned tire shop on Alameda Avenue. The parking lot light flickered once. Then the white Silverado pulled in. Ruben Alvarez, 52 years old, was locking the register when the side door came open. Not the front, the side. The one that only the family used. Within 4 minutes, 5 people were gone. Ruben, his wife Norma, 49, their daughter Camila, 24, their son Diego, 22, and Norma's sister Yolanda, 47. The register was on its side, the cash drawer untouched. One Nike sneaker lay in the alley behind the building. Size 7. Women's. Pink. No shell casings. No witnesses. No cameras on that block with working feeds. The ransom demand came 41 minutes later. A single WhatsApp message from a burner number. $480,000. 65 hours. Cross-border drop in Ciudad Juarez. And one line at the end that the FBI agent who read it would not forget for the rest of his career. The eldest goes first. That message reached El Paso field office at 10:22 p.m. By 10:55, the duty agent had opened a kidnap ransom file and called Quantico. By midnight, hostage rescue team was wheels up from Andrews Air Force Base, staging into Biggs Army Airfield on the eastern edge of El Paso in under 6 hours. Texas Rangers activated their crisis response unit and took the tire shop scene themselves, preserving it before any local unit contaminated the perimeter. 65 hours. That was the clock. The question was not whether the FBI could find the Alvarez family in 65 hours. The question was whether they could find them without triggering the execution the message promised. One small detail would answer that question. A license plate, a wrong direction, and a truck riding low on its rear springs. Ruben Alvarez had spent 23 years building that tire shop. He bought it in 2003 from a man who was retiring and couldn't find a buyer. He expanded it twice, hired local, paid on time. His name was on the Chamber of Commerce plaque in the window. Norma handled the books. Camila had just passed her real estate licensing exam the previous spring and was saving to open her own office. Diego worked the shop on weekends and was 18 credits from finishing his business degree at UTEP. They were not a wealthy family in any conspicuous sense. Their house was 3 miles from the shop, a 4-bedroom on a street of similar houses, with a concrete driveway and a basketball hoop that Diego had put up when he was 14 and never taken down. Ruben drove a 2019 Ford F-150. Norma drove a gray Kia. Camila was still making payments on a used Civic she'd bought after passing her exam. They ate at the same 3 restaurants. They attended the same church. They were the kind of family that is visible in a community precisely because they are stable, consistent, and present in the same places at the same times for years running. That consistency, which is the product of honest and disciplined living, was also the thing that made them surveyable. They were not random. That is the detail investigators would circle back to repeatedly in the days that followed. A kidnapping for ransom at this scale, $480,000, a coordinated extraction, a prepared burner channel, does not happen to a family selected at random from a parking lot. This requires surveillance. It requires knowing the family's schedule, their routines, who is typically present at closing time on a Tuesday. It requires knowing that Yolanda would be there that night because she came for the family's monthly dinner, which they ate in the back office after locking up. A detail that was not public information. Someone had watched this family. For a long time, the Texas Rangers processed the tire shop through the night. The lead ranger on scene, a 20-year veteran of the Major Crimes Unit, noted three things in his initial log. The overturned register had been knocked sideways, not swept, indicating the person who hit it was moving fast, not searching. The back door's deadbolt had been manipulated with a bump key or similar tool, not forced. And the single sneaker in the alley was positioned toe pointing outward, toward the street, not inward toward the building. That meant it had come off during movement, not a struggle inside. Camila Alvarez had been running toward something, or someone had been pulling her away from it very fast. The Rangers photographed every surface. They swabbed the deadbolt housing, the register's side panel where the contact mark showed, the interior door frame on the side entrance, and the concrete lip of the alley step where the sneaker lay. The alley itself got a grid search on hands and knees under portable work lights that a ranger sergeant had pulled from his personal truck. They found three things in that grid: a partial boot impression in a patch of soft caliche near the alley's drainage edge, a small piece of dark fabric snagged on a protruding bolt on the building's exterior wall at approximately shoulder height, and a single black zip tie, the heavy-duty kind, 200-pound tensile, the kind sold in bulk at hardware stores, lying open and unused near the alley's far end. Whether it had been dropped during the abduction or was pre-existing debris from normal shop operations was not immediately determinable. The Rangers logged it and bagged it anyway. The fabric swatch was approximately 2 centimeters by 1 centimeter. Dark synthetic material, consistent with a jacket or work pants. It was sent to the FBI laboratory on the same transport that took the audio from the ransom call. The boot impression measured 31 centimeters. Men's size 12 or 13. Deep heel strike, shallow toe. Consistent with someone moving at a fast walk or slow jog, carrying significant weight. The Rangers photographed it, cast it in dental stone, and had the cast back at the forward operating base before 6 a.m. FBI hostage rescue team landed at Biggs at 3:14 a.m. 12 operators, 2 tactical coordinators, a cast unit, cellular analysis survey team, and a negotiation specialist assigned to monitor all incoming contact from the burner number. HRT set up a forward operating base inside a National Guard hangar at Biggs. No local law enforcement presence inside that hangar. Operational security was absolute from the first hour. The negotiation specialist sent a reply to the WhatsApp number at 4:03 a.m. Measured. Acknowledging the demand. Requesting proof of life, a photograph, a voice call, something current. Standard protocol. Something to anchor the hostages as living before the clock ran further down. No response came for 9 hours. That silence was its own kind of information. In ransom operations, a 9-hour silence after first contact typically means one of two things. Either the operators are disciplined and deliberately making the other side feel the pressure, or they are moving the hostages and don't want any communication that could be traced during transit. The cast team was already working the burner number. The WhatsApp account had been created 4 days before the kidnapping. The SIM card associated with it had pinged 3 cell towers in the El Paso metro area before going dark. Last ping, 9:47 p.m., 7 minutes after the Alvarez family disappeared. Tower location, the intersection of Loop 375 and Railroad Drive, 4.2 miles from the tire shop. That placed the phone, and whoever held it, moving northeast on Loop 375 within minutes of the abduction. That was useful. That was a direction. What it did not give them was a destination. There is a detail in this case that I spent considerable time on when reviewing the available documentation, one that does not appear in any of the initial press reporting on the July 6th indictments, but which is central to understanding how this operation was cracked open. It has to do with a license plate reader on Loop 375. A piece of infrastructure that most people driving through East El Paso do not know exists, positioned at a camera cluster near the Horizon City interchange, and a record that, on its face, meant nothing. Until it meant everything. The El Paso Regional Intelligence Center, which aggregates plate reader data from dozens of fixed cameras across the metro, operates what is called a hot list query system. Any plate flagged in connection with a federal investigation gets a real-time alert pushed to the relevant case file. But the system also logs every plate that passes a reader, flagged or not. That passive log is what CAST analysts pulled at 5:30 a.m. on the morning after the abduction. They were looking for any vehicle that had passed the Loop 375 camera cluster in the window between 9:40 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. That gave them a list of 83 vehicles. Standard query. They cross-referenced against vehicles flagged in existing federal databases. 4 hits, all minor. Nothing that moved the needle. Then an analyst noticed something that was not in the hot list. It was in the raw timestamp log. A white Chevrolet Silverado, Texas plates, had passed the Loop 375 reader heading northeast at 10:04 p.m. 93 minutes later, at 11:37 p.m., the same plate passed the same reader heading southwest. Same direction as the tire shop. Same direction as Ciudad Juarez. 1 truck. 2 passes. 93 minutes apart. And on the second pass, the camera's automated vehicle classification system had flagged the truck with a notation that appears on less than 2% of all logged vehicles. Rear suspension load indicator elevated. The truck was riding low on its rear springs on the second pass. It was carrying significantly more weight than on the first. It had picked something up. In the 93 minutes between those two reads, that Silverado had gone somewhere in the Horizon City area, northeast of Loop 375, loaded something heavy into its bed, and was heading back southwest. The analyst flagged it at 5:51 a.m. By 6:04, CAST had the full plate query running. The Silverado was registered to a company called Duro Holdings LLC. Duro Holdings was incorporated in Nevada in March of 2025. Its registered agent was a Las Vegas-based incorporation service used by hundreds of shell companies. Its listed business address was a UPS store mailbox in Henderson, Nevada. It had no public-facing business activity, no website, no licensing records, no employees on file with the Nevada Secretary of State. I want to pause here because what strikes me most about this case is not the speed of the investigation. It is the specific shape of the break. The license plate reader did not catch a criminal. It caught a vehicle doing something that was individually unremarkable. A truck driving northeast, then driving southwest. That is not a crime. That is not even suspicious on its face. It was the rear suspension load indicator, a data point that most plate reader systems log, but that almost no investigator thinks to query, that changed the meaning of everything else. The strangest part? The system flagged that load notation automatically. No human requested it. It was there, in the raw log, because the camera had been upgraded with a weight estimation module the previous November as part of a commercial vehicle compliance program. A module installed for an entirely different purpose. And it happened to log the weight differential on a white Silverado carrying 5 people in its covered bed on the night of July 2, 2026. Duro Holdings LLC. That name appeared in one other place in federal databases. A 40-acre agricultural parcel in Horizon City, Texas, approximately 12 miles northeast of the Loop 375 camera cluster, had been purchased in the name of Duro Holdings in September of 2025. The parcel was listed as a commercial nursery operation. No active business license with El Paso County. No irrigation permits filed. No utility accounts in the company's name, though El Paso Electric showed power draw at the property address consistent with residential occupancy, lights, HVAC, a refrigerator load, on a continuous basis since October of 2025. Someone was living there. Someone who did not want their name on a utility account. CAST ran the Duro Holdings registration chain against the sealed federal indictment documentation that had been shared with HRT under compartmented access. The indictment, which AG Blanche would unseal on July 6th, had been building for 14 months across a joint task force spanning Texas and Illinois. It named 8 Tren de Aragua operatives for kidnappings and at least 2 executions. The operational cell had used a rotating series of shell companies for property acquisition in Texas. Duro Holdings was on the list. It was listed as an associated entity of the primary cell. At 7:42 a.m., the Horizon City parcel became the primary target location. The Alvarez family had been missing for 9 hours and 58 minutes. The clock still showed 55 hours remaining on the ransom demand. HRT does not move on a target at 7:42 a.m., not with 5 hostages inside and no confirmed layout. What HRT does at 7:42 a.m. is begin building the picture they need to move safely. That process, in this case, would take the next 48 hours. Aerial surveillance was up over the Horizon City parcel within 90 minutes of the intelligence assessment. A fixed-wing aircraft operating at altitude, equipped with synthetic aperture radar and a long-range optical suite, flew a holding pattern over the target area through the morning. Imagery analysts at the BIG's forward operating base reviewed feeds in near real time. The parcel had a main structure, a single-story block construction building approximately 60 feet by 40 feet, and 2 secondary outbuildings. A vehicle matching the description of the white Silverado was parked adjacent to the main structure, partially obscured under a corrugated metal shade structure. 2 additional vehicles were also present. A gray Toyota Tundra and a dark-colored SUV with no readable plates. At 9:17 a.m., a figure emerged from the main structure, walked to the Silverado, opened the passenger door, retrieved something, and returned inside. The figure was adult male, approximate height 6 feet, wearing a dark shirt. Exposure time, 42 seconds. Insufficient for biometric capture at that altitude. The negotiation specialist sent a second message to the burner WhatsApp at 11 a.m. Proof of life. Still requesting. Still measured. At 12:31 p.m., the burner responded for the first time since the initial demand. A voice note. 19 seconds. A male voice, speaking in Spanish, confirming the demand, $480,000. Juarez drop, 61 hours remaining. Then, in the background, for approximately 3 seconds, a sound. A woman's voice. One word, partially audible. It sounded like a name. The audio was immediately extracted and sent to the FBI Laboratories Voice Analysis Unit in Quantico. The background sound was enhanced. The word, after processing, was assessed with high confidence as Ruben. A woman saying Ruben in the background of a ransom call. Norma Alvarez, in all probability, hearing the call being made and responding to it. She was alive. They were alive. At 12:31 p.m., approximately 15 hours after disappearing, at least 2 members of the Alvarez family were alive at an audible distance from the burner phone. That voice note changed the operational calculus. It confirmed the hostages were at or near the primary target location. It confirmed at least one was conscious and aware, and it gave the negotiation team something to work with. What it did not resolve was the deeper problem that HRT had been sitting with since dawn. The Horizon City parcel had no public approach that was not visible from the main structure for a distance of at least 400 meters in 3 directions. A vehicle-mounted approach would be seen. A foot approach across open agricultural land in daylight would be seen. And an approach before nightfall would risk triggering an execution before operators could achieve entry. This is the part of the operation that most people never consider. The breach itself is quick. The 48 hours before the breach are when hostage rescue operations are actually won or lost. At 2:17 p.m. on July 3rd, the negotiation specialist placed a scheduled callback to the burner number, as had been agreed in the prior exchange. The call connected after 8 rings. The same male voice, flat, controlled. He spoke first, without waiting for the specialist to speak, which is a specific negotiation behavior. It signals that the subject has been trained or coached to deny the other party control of conversational tempo from the opening second. The specialist stayed on script. He acknowledged the family. He acknowledged the demand. He said the money was being arranged, but that the family needed to show they were in condition to receive it, that a payment could not be made on behalf of people whose status was unconfirmed. He used the word family 7 times in the call. Deliberate. The research on ransom negotiation consistently shows that humanizing language, names, relationships, family roles, increases the probability of proof-of-life accommodation even among operatives who have committed violence against the same subjects. The subject on the call said nothing for 4 seconds after the specialist finished speaking. Then he said, "One video." 30 seconds. No requests. The call ended. It had lasted 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The FBI laboratory was already running audio analysis on the voice note. The second call gave them additional material. Voice pattern analysis confirmed both recordings involved the same speaker. Accent pattern assessments indicated the speaker's primary linguistic formation was consistent with a Venezuelan coastal regional dialect, specifically characteristics associated with Anzoátegui or Sucre states. That assessment was flagged to the Joint Task Force's intelligence analysts, who cross-referenced it against the named subjects in the sealed indictment. 2 of the 8 named subjects had documented origins in Anzoátegui state. One of those 2 had a prior federal case file from an immigration enforcement action in 2024 that included a voice recording. The comparison came back at 71% confidence, below the threshold for evidentiary use, but sufficient to sharpen the investigative focus. At 4:53 p.m., a video file arrived via the same WhatsApp account. 11 seconds. Handheld. The framing was tight and clearly intentional. Walls visible, but no identifying features. No windows. Lighting from a single overhead source that cast the image in the flat yellow tone of an incandescent bulb. 5 people seated on the floor. Ruben, Norma, Diego, Yolanda, visible. The 5th figure, partially cut off at the frame's left edge, was consistent with Camila's build and hair. Each person held a handwritten piece of paper showing a date. July 3rd. All 5 appeared physically intact. No visible injuries, though the image quality and duration were insufficient for a thorough clinical assessment. Ruben was looking directly at the camera. Norma had her eyes down. Diego's jaw was set in a way that the imagery analyst later described in the case file as controlled distress, subject maintaining composure under apparent significant duress. He was 22 years old, holding a piece of paper with that day's date on it, sitting on a concrete floor, and he was holding it together. That detail sat with several people in the Biggs forward operating base for the remainder of the operation. The video was processed by the FBI laboratory within 40 minutes of receipt. Frame-by-frame analysis of the wall surfaces behind the subjects identified a partial texture pattern consistent with concrete block construction, matching the main structure identified in aerial surveillance. Luminosity analysis of the overhead light source suggested a single bulb fixture mounted at a height of approximately 8 feet, consistent with a standard residential or outbuilding interior ceiling height. There was nothing in the video that contradicted the Horizon City parcel as the holding location. There was nothing that confirmed it beyond what they already had. But absence of contradiction, in this context, counted for something. HRT's tactical coordinator ran 3 approach scenarios through the evening of July 3rd and the morning of July 4th. Each scenario had a critical obstacle. Scenario 1, vehicle convoy approach from the north, required crossing 500 meters of open caliche road with no cover, observable from the main structure's front windows at approximately 30 seconds of travel time. Scenario 2, foot infiltration from the south through an adjacent field, required crossing terrain that aerial imagery showed was partially fenced, with what appeared to be motion-activated lighting on the southern outbuilding. Scenario 3, a split approach, 2 elements from different vectors simultaneously, was viable but required knowing the internal layout of the main structure before entry. Without that, a split approach risked one element triggering an alarm before the second element was in position. 3 scenarios, each with a flaw that could cost lives. The solution came from an unexpected direction. El Paso Electric's commercial grid data, subpoenaed under emergency federal authority at 6 a.m. on July 4th, showed the Horizon City parcel's electrical load pattern in detail. The main structure ran consistent HVAC draw from 9 p.m. to approximately 2 a.m., then showed a significant reduction, consistent with the HVAC cycling down as nighttime temperatures dropped in the high desert, and interior climate control reduced its workload. More usefully, the motion lighting on the southern outbuilding was on a separate circuit that showed cycling behavior. It was timer-controlled, not motion-activated. It ran from 9 p.m. to midnight. After midnight, it was off. After midnight, the southern approach was dark. The grid data also revealed one additional detail that the tactical coordinator flagged in his operational notes, and that does not appear in any public reporting on this case. Between 11 p.m. and midnight on both July 2nd and July 3rd, the main structure showed a brief but measurable spike in power draw, lasting approximately 4 to 7 minutes, consistent with a high-wattage appliance cycling on, most likely a microwave or a countertop convection unit. The same window both nights. A pattern. Someone in that building was heating food at roughly the same time each night, which meant that between 11 p.m. and midnight, at least one occupant was almost certainly in what functioned as a kitchen or common area, separated from wherever the hostages were held. In the 48 hours of surveillance work that preceded the breach, that detail became one input among many in modeling the interior movement of the cell's occupants. It suggested that the late-night window, after the kitchen activity concluded and before dawn, represented the period of lowest active movement inside the structure. People who have just eaten tend to settle. The high desert at 2 a.m. in early July runs cold enough that anyone not on a watch rotation would be inclined toward a sleeping position. The tactical coordinator built that into his final plan. Put yourself in the tactical coordinator's position for a moment. It is 3 a.m. on July 5th. You have 5 hostages in a building you cannot fully see inside. You have a ransom deadline that is now less than 36 hours away. You have a cell that has already executed at least 2 people in connection with previous operations. And you have a 400-meter open approach from the only viable dark side vector, which means your operators will spend approximately 3.5 minutes exposed in open ground between the fence line and the structure. 3.5 minutes in hostile territory, with people inside who may be awake. What you do not have is a better option. At 2 a.m. on July 5th, HRT's tactical coordinator submitted the operational plan to the special agent in charge at the Biggs forward base. Southern approach. Post-midnight entry window. 4 flashbang initiators. 2 simultaneous entry points. Main structure front door, and a secondary window identified on the eastern wall. Entry at the narrowest point of the ransom clock, hour 61 of 65. Late enough for darkness and fatigue to work in the team's favor. early enough to have a 4-hour buffer before the deadline. The plan was approved at 2:48 a.m. Here's the take that some will push back on. The 61-hour window was not a failure of federal response time. The deliberate 48-hour build before entry was the correct decision, and it was harder to make than it sounds. Every hour that the Alvarez family spent inside that building was an hour that federal agencies were under pressure, from each other, from El Paso field office, from the family members outside who knew something was happening but not what. The pressure to move fast in a hostage situation is enormous and almost always wrong. The agencies held the line on timeline discipline. That discipline is the reason 5 people walked out instead of fewer. That question does not have a clean answer. This case is as clear an argument for patience as you will find in recent federal operational history. 48 hours of surveillance. 48 hours of signal intelligence, grid analysis, approach modeling, and audio enhancement. 48 hours of a family in a locked room in Horizon City, Texas, not knowing whether anyone was coming. Hour 61. 4 a.m., July 5th, 2026. Temperature, 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind southwest at 8 miles per hour. Cloud cover, partial, moon behind overcast. The approach was as dark as it was going to get. 12 HRT operators moved from a staged position 400 meters south of the main structure fence line. They had been in position since 2:30 a.m., allowing 30 minutes of stillness before movement to let any ambient sounds from their staging settle. They crossed the fence line in 2 columns of 6, separated by 40 meters of lateral distance. No lights, no radio traffic, hand signals, and pre-coordinated timing. The terrain between the fence line and the main structure was flat caliche hardpan with isolated clumps of desert scrub, creosote, and sparse camisa that provided no meaningful concealment, but also no obstacles that would generate noise underfoot if the operators maintained heel-to-toe placement. They had walked this approach in their minds hundreds of times from the aerial imagery. Every operator knew where the small irrigation rut ran diagonally across the approach path at approximately 180 meters. Every operator knew that the eastern outbuilding had a loose sheet of corrugated metal on its south-facing wall that would rattle in a sustained wind gust. The wind that night was 8 miles per hour, steady southwest. Below the threshold where that metal sheet would move. That had been checked. Everything that could be checked had been checked. 3 minutes and 20 seconds of open ground. Measured in heartbeats. The first element reached the main structure's eastern wall at 4:03 a.m. The second element reached the front corner at 4:04 a.m. Both elements confirmed position. The tactical coordinator, monitoring from a vehicle position 800 meters north, gave the initiation signal. 4 flashbang grenades. 2 doors. Simultaneous breach. The entry took 11 seconds from first flash to all clear sweep. Inside the main structure, 4 subjects. 3 were taken into custody without resistance. 1 subject, in the rear room, presented a rifle at the entry team. He was eliminated. The entry team recorded no shots fired from any other subject. The Alvarez family was located in 2 rooms on the eastern side of the structure, a back room and an adjacent smaller space. Ruben, Norma, Diego, and Yolanda were in the back room. Camila was in the smaller space adjacent. All 5 were ambulatory. All 5 required immediate medical attention. Paramedic units, staged 800 meters north, moved to the structure within 4 minutes of the all-clear. Ruben Alvarez, 52 years old, walked out the main structure door at 4:19 a.m., under his own power. He was not moving fast. He was not moving slow. He walked the way a person walks when they have been sitting in a small room for 61 hours and are not entirely certain the ground is going to hold them. One of the HRT operators, the team's senior breacher, whose name does not appear in any public record of this operation, had retrieved the Nike sneaker from the Texas Rangers' evidence log the previous evening with the Ranger commander's informal permission. He had carried it in his kit from Biggs to the staging position and through the approach. After the paramedics had Camila, he walked to where Ruben was sitting on the ambulance tailgate, reached into his kit, and handed the sneaker to him without a word. Ruben Alvarez took it, sat down on the tailgate. His arm went around his daughter's shoulders. He was still holding the sneaker at 4:47 a.m. when the last of the 5 ambulances cleared the property line onto the county road. 3 subjects were in federal custody. 1 was dead. The 40-acre Horizon City parcel, in the name of Duro Holdings LLC, was now a federal crime scene. The July 6th unsealing of AG Blanche's indictments named 8 Tren de Aragua operatives across Texas and Illinois. The Horizon City arrests produced 3 of those 8. A 4th had been in custody since June on an unrelated charge in Cook County, Illinois. The remaining 4 subjects named in the indictment were not in custody as of the date the indictments were unsealed. Federal warrants were outstanding. Extradition requests were in process with Venezuelan and Colombian authorities, though the operational history of those requests in Tren de Aragua cases does not suggest swift resolution. The Duro Holdings LLC network extended beyond the Horizon City parcel. Federal investigators identified 3 additional properties in Texas associated with the same shell chain, 2 in Harris County, 1 in Bexar County. All 3 were searched under federal warrants in the 72 hours following the Horizon City breach. What was recovered at those properties is contained in sealed suppression hearing filings that have not been made public as of this date. The scope of what investigators found there has not been officially characterized. What this case tells us about the current operational shape of Tren de Aragua in the American Southwest is specific and important. This is not a border proximity network. The Horizon City cell was not operating as a crossing facilitation ring. It was operating as an extortion and kidnapping enterprise targeting established, documented, economically visible American families in El Paso. The Alvarez family was chosen because they were known, because they had assets that could be liquidated, and because they had ties in Ciudad Juarez that the cell apparently believed would facilitate a cross-border ransom payment. The surveillance that preceded the abduction, the advanced knowledge of Norma's sister visiting on that specific Tuesday, the bump key entry, the coordinated extraction of 5 people in under 4 minutes, was not improvised. There is a line in the federal case documentation that reads almost like something from a different era of organized crime. Subject cell maintained physical surveillance of the target family for an estimated period of not less than 30 days prior to the incident date. 30 days. Ruben Alvarez drove to his shop every morning, unlocked the same door, parked in the same spot, and someone was watching him every day for a month before they moved. What that surveillance looked like, in practical terms, is partially reconstructed in the federal investigative summary. A vehicle, believed to be the gray Toyota Tundra, recovered at the Horizon City parcel, was identified in parking lot footage from a convenience store 1 block east of the tire shop on 6 separate dates in June of 2026. Each appearance lasted between 45 minutes and 2 hours. The vehicle was parked facing the tire shop's side entrance on 4 of those 6 occasions. On 2 of the 6 dates, the footage was insufficient to confirm the vehicle's position, but the timestamps matched the tire shop's closing window, between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on weeknights. A human being sat in that Tundra, in that parking lot, 6 times over the course of a month, and watched the Alvarez family close their shop. Watched what time the lights went off. Watched who arrived and when. Watched which door they used. Watched whether a car they didn't recognize in the lot caused anyone inside to hesitate before leaving. Watched until they knew enough to be certain. The investigative summary also notes that the cell had access to at least one local source of information about the family, someone familiar enough with the Alvarez family's personal schedule to know that Norma's sister Yolanda attended the monthly dinner. That detail is described in the summary as indicative of a human intelligence component supplementing physical surveillance. Whether that human intelligence component was a paid informant, a coerced acquaintance, or someone operating under a different kind of pressure has not been publicly established. It is one of the threads in this case that remains unresolved in the public record. The $480,000 demand was not paid. No cross-border drop was made. Whether the cell knew, by hour 61, that federal operators were closing the distance, whether some signal reached them, some change in the surveillance aircraft's pattern that an experienced lookout might have read, is not established in the public record. The subjects in custody have not provided cooperation as of the indictment unsealing date. Here's something worth sitting with. The ransom amount, $480,000, is a number that has appeared in 2 previous federal kidnapping cases in Texas, attributed to Tren de Aragua affiliated cells. Not approximately that amount. That specific amount, $480,000, which suggests either a standardized ransom matrix, a price list for a family of a particular economic profile, or a single financial architect somewhere in the network who sets the numbers and who has not been identified in any of the 8 indictments unsealed on July 6th. One person, probably not in Texas, probably not in the United States, setting the price on American families and collecting a percentage when the ransom comes through. That person is not in custody. The Duro Holdings LLC corporate registration in Nevada was dissolved by federal civil forfeiture action within 48 hours of the Horizon City breach. The 40-acre parcel was seized. The white Silverado was seized. The shell company chain that connected Duro Holdings to the broader cell structure is currently the subject of a money laundering investigation being run jointly by FinCEN and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit out of the Dallas field office. That investigation has produced no public charges as of this date. The Alvarez family, Ruben, Norma, Camila, Diego, Yolanda. Back in El Paso. The tire shop on Alameda Avenue has been closed since July 2nd. Whether it reopens is not a matter of federal record. It is a matter that belongs to the people who built it. 3 of 8 indicted subjects are in custody from this operation. 4 remain fugitive on active warrants. The financial architecture that funded and coordinated the cell remains partially mapped. The surveillance on El Paso families that preceded this abduction, whether it is continuing, whether other families are currently being watched, is not a question that federal agencies have publicly addressed. The Alvarez family was found. The network that took them is not fully mapped. And the person who set the price is still setting prices somewhere. Will this cell, or one like it, reconstitute in the El Paso metro within the next 2 years? Drop your answer in the comments. The federal task force that ran this operation has formally requested continued multi-agency resources for the region through the end of 2027. Whether that request is funded is a different kind of clock. 65 hours was the deadline the cell set. Hour 61 was when HRT came through the door. 4 hours is the margin between the Alvarez family and a different ending. 4 hours, a license plate reader, and a rear suspension load indicator on a camera installed for commercial vehicle compliance that nobody in that cell knew existed. The network is not gone. The demand that built it is unchanged. And somewhere northeast of El Paso, on a county road at 4 a.m., the last ambulance turned onto the highway, and its taillights disappeared into the dark.